Hello and good morning. This is Brad Bertelli, Curator for the Keys History and Discovery Center, and we're here for another edition of Discover History here at the beautiful museum where we've been broadcasting for the last 15 months or so, bringing the museum to the outside world for those people who cannot venture into or have not had the opportunity yet to venture into our facility. So today we're going to talk a little bit about the early pioneers. This was a wild frontier in the early 1800s when this became an American territory in 1821. And a lot of the first people who arrived in Key West specifically early on and to much smaller degrees, smaller settlements in Port Monroe and Key Vaca, which is the Marathon area, for instance. Most of these early settlers, these early people who arrived were from the New England states and from Charleston. A lot of the names that we hear, Whitehead and Fitzpatrick and Simonton, all these people were coming down from the New England states and from Charleston and coming down into the Keys because, for any new territory, it was all about opportunity. And Key West offered a new opportunity. And once the idea of wrecking began to spread, and as Key West became the wrecking hub of the Florida Reef, really drew people to the place because you want opportunity, you want a chance to make money, and Key West offered this kind of blank palette, this blank slate to create something new, which can be very both lucrative and inviting, and for those people who are adventurous, for an opportunity to try their hand at something new, which is how two of the prominent early wreckers who arrived, Joshua Appleby, who arrived around 1822 and set up his little Port Monroe community settlement of about 4 or 5 families in the Key Vaca area, and Jacob Hausman, who came down about the same time from New York, Staten Island, New York, arrived in 1822, and this is kind of just at the very beginning of Key West. And while Appleby did not go to Key West, but decided to go to Key Vaca, and create this little settlement where he was offering services for wrecking, also talking about farming. And with the wreckers, as the wrecking industry grew and more opportunity came, it also brought the Bahamians over from the islands. And one of those reasons was because one of the very first things that the American government did was, as this became an American territory, made it a rule of law that if you're going to salvage ships off an American territory, and at this point, after the Adams-Onis Treaty in 1821 is finalized, and both the Florida Keys and the Florida Reef become an American territory, then they obviously understood the amount of money that was available, that was being salvaged off the wreck. And prior to 1821, these wreckers were going to Havana if they were working under the Spanish flag, or going to England, going to Nassau if they're working under the British flag. What the government did was, if you're going to salvage wrecks, you have to bring that cargo to an American port of entry. And at that point, it was St. Augustine, and then early on, 1823 becomes Key West as well. So this, you go where the money is. And at this point, a lot of the Bahamians who were acting as wreckers and salvaging cargo, it didn't make sense for them to have to work out of the Bahamas and then salvage wrecks off the Florida Reef and then come to Key West, to settle their salvage claim. So this actually brought a lot of people across the Atlantic and settling here onto the Florida Keys. And because wrecking wasn't really a full-time operation, there were other industries that all these wreckers would engage in, turtling and fishing, and for instance. And then so as the opportunity would come, as Key West began to grow and became a really large, it would become this little outpost at the tip of the Florida Keys becomes this important outpost in all of the territory, and becomes really on the back of wrecking, becomes one of the richest cities in the country, per capita, by the way. And also as these wreckers were fishing and turtling and then working the reef line and salvaging wrecks, here comes Captain Ben Baker, who in 1840s, 1850s is operating as a wrecker out of Key West, and suddenly he gets the idea that he's going to become and Baker is actually, this is one of the Bahamians who had come across, and he was, and as they were farming in the Bahamas, you do what you're used to, you do what's familiar. So he decides to give farming a chance in the Florida Keys. And he goes to Cuba. He sails his 60-foot, I think, schooner Rapid to Havana and picks up thousands of pineapple slips and suckers. These are the small little offshoots of the pineapple plant that generates a new plant. And he buys them in Cuba and then comes to the Upper Keys and clears land on both Plantation Key and on Key Largo and creates these first of the two pineapple plantations. So now this new territory in the Florida Keys is not only a great place to come and make money working the reef line salvaging cargo, but now it's become also a profitable place to farm. And as this word gets out in the 1860s and the word spreads about the success of Baker's pineapple plantations, more and more Bahamians begin to come across the Atlantic and develop these little communities up and down the Florida Keys and begin to also make their living off the land. Planter, Florida, or Planter in Key Largo was the perfect example of this. The Johnson family coming over from the Bahamas and creating this little and clearing land on this little place on Key Largo, which is kind of in the area of Harry Harris Park today and Ocean Point Suites condominiums. About mile marker was at 94-ish, 94, 93 kind of, if you're driving down the overseas highway and you see our lone Dairy Queen in the Upper Keys, if you take a left and go towards the ocean, all this area was farmland, and it becomes known as Planter because these people it's a planting community, and it becomes a place where farming is taking place. And it's pineapples, it's tomatoes, it's cucumbers and onions and melons, and it's just this rich this land becomes a really rich resource for farming, and more these families that you hear of still today, the Alberries, the Penders, the Currys, the Lows, all these early families that came over, largely, at this point, it's not so much the New Englanders coming down, but more so the Bahamians coming across. So we have this mix of, and that's kind of when you go down to Key West, you can see this really cool, interesting architecture. It's kind of this mix of New England meets the Bahamas. So this is really kind of how the island, the backbone of the island, islands begin to form, and it's all based on wrecking, and it's based on farming, and it's this mix of New England culture and Bahamian culture that begins to really create this really rich historical, this rich history of life here in the Upper Keys, and it's not just Key West at this point. It's which is. People come down to the Keys, and even when they're in the Keys, you ask them where they're going. They're going, oh, we're going to the Keys, and they're going to Key West. But there's so many islands and so much history and so much pioneer history of these early families that is above and beyond Key West. But then as you dig deeper into these stories, all of these families, these early families, they really are connected. So Key West talks about one family, and the Florida Keys talks about being one family, and it really does become one, interchanging or one connected family up and down the Keys, because Key West, Key West, even though you're living up in the Upper Keys, you need to go to Key West to get produce or to get coffee and flour and sugar, but also even up until the 1950s, and maybe even into the early 1950s, if you're in school and you want to go to high school, you have to go to Key West to finish high school, or Homestead, true, depending on where you are. But even, and also, when Coral Shores, becomes a school in 1951, 1952, people from Marathon are coming up. So it really is this large connection of family and people. Yes.
Eric has a question. Is it true that wreckers would move channel markers to make boats wreck?
It is not true. There's very little evidence of this actually happening. It's a great legend, it's a great story. I'm not sure how many channel markers there were in the 1830s, 1840s, 1850s, but that's one of those stories, this burning of false lights and things to lure these ships off the wrecks. It probably happened prior to this becoming an American territory, when it was more about the Spanish and the Bahamian wreckers who were coming, because in 1823, when these first wrecking, the first laws about wrecking that the American government distributes, and one of the new laws in 1823 makes the moving of the false lights and moving and doing this kind of behavior makes it illegal. So it probably did happen sometime in the past, but there really is not much. There's very little historical record of that happening after it becomes an American territory. One great example is that there was some sailors on the ocean sailing past, and they were complaining about false lights, and it turned out just to be a campfire on one of the islands. So that was not really a false light, but just people cooking dinner and trying to keep the mosquitoes at bay. So that is one of those great legends and one of those things that people talk about, and it probably happened at some point, but not so much during the American territory period. Because you also understand that Commodore David Porter arrives in 1823, so there's a military presence here in the Florida Keys and Key West early on, and those kind of things would have been reported, and Porter would have understood it because he was sailing up and down. And for instance, I talked about Joshua Appleby prior, and he is kind of known because he was one of those kind of crooked wreckers who had a partnership with a privateer or ships coming from South America, and those ships would come up to Port Monroe and around Key Vaca, check in, and then go out and gently wreck on the reef, and then Appleby would go salvage the claim. And Porter got wind of that and began, to investigate and actually arrests Appleby and takes him to back to Rhode Island to stand trial, which he kind of drags on and he comes back down. But so there was a military presence, so that kind of behavior would have been rooted out by Porter's mosquito fleet. Now I'm going to say that this has been a great run for us for the last 15 months coming here, and our main goal, because of the pandemic, that our doors were not open, so we wanted to bring our story and tell our stories and bring the museum out to the public since they couldn't come to us. But we are going to be, this will be our last Tuesday for a few months, as one of our staff members will be going on maternity leave, and there'll be a 7th generation of conchs coming into the world in the next week or two. Hopefully on July 9th, we'll find out. So we're going to be taking a break until October, and then once October comes, we will launch back into our fall lecture series. So we'll be doing a combination of both these virtual presentations, but also welcoming people back into the Discovery Center to do in-person lectures, and we will be back doing these on Tuesday morning or some variation thereof as well come October. But for the next 3 months, we are going to be taking a virtual hiatus. We'll still be plugging along and creating exhibits and adding stories to our kiosks and bringing more information through the Discovery Center. But we'll be putting a hold on these virtual presentations here for several months. It's been a great time, and we're happy that we've been able to reach out and touch so many people, and the support that we've had has been amazing. Our videos have been seen by more than a million views. There was some kind of metric that Aaron came up with. So it's really fulfilling to us that we've been able to kind of expand our footprint and our reach, our Florida Keys history reach across the country and to others as well.
And we have some comments from some folks saying, they're sad to see us go on hiatus. Perhaps you can tell them where they can find our
backlog. So all these episodes that we've been filming are available on our YouTube channel. You can go to the YouTube Florida Keys History and Discovery Center. It's got dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens of these presentations, plus some of our other outreach programs like Cocktails with a Curator. It does where I spend an hour sipping on beer and answering questions one-on-one. Those are all available online. You can also follow us on Instagram, on Twitter, on Facebook, where we post a lot of these pictures. Excuse me. And tell our stories, and and get the history out there. So plenty, and what better way than to come visit us, the facility, physically visit and experience some of the artifacts and see the exhibits and watch the films that we have upstairs. And just you can spend an hour here, you can spend 5 hours here, and there's enough information to keep anyone's level of interest going.
Ryan shared the link to our YouTube channel.
Excellent.
You, Ryan.
Is that Ryan Hark or Ryan up in Canada?
Ryan Foster.
Yeah, so it's been great that you guys have been some of you are here every week, and like Ryan, for instance, and Ellen Aish, and people who are here every week for us, and we appreciate that. And we'll be back, and in the meantime, we're gonna just take a little break. Erin's gonna have her second child, and we're gonna just keep building and working to further develop the Keys History and Discovery Center. If you're in the Islamorada area, if you're heading down to Key West, we're on the grounds of the Islander Resort, right across the highway from that big that big mermaid at Lorelei. So please come visit us and come see what we've done. It's an amazing facility with so much information, and I know you won't be disappointed. So I'll see you again in October. So thanks so much, and we'll have a great summer.